All right, cool cats. So I'm just going to pick up where I left off and go into kind of some of the things that were swirling through my head as I was thinking about revamping these Jensen CS315s. If you watched my first video, which was probably entirely dry, sorry, that's just how I am. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. Revamping an old set of Jensen CS315s from gotta be 30 years old. So today I'm excited. I am going to actually show you some of the components that I'm going to use, and I'm going to tell you why I chose them, and I'm going to let you know some of the design considerations that I was cooking up in my head. All right, so first of all, when you're just playing around, right? This is a hobby, a passion, something you love doing, but you don't want to, break the bank or take grocery or mortgage money to fund this, right? You want to go cheap, right? So what do? Craigslist. Craigslist is awesome. eBay is awesome. You can find all kind of great deals on old speakers on them two sites. Downside with eBay is you're going to pay for shipping. So a cool $100 pair of speakers is going to turn into a $200 pair of speakers by the time you're done with shipping, because they're heavy and they're big. So yeah, needless to say, you can find more options on eBay, but I sort by distance, because sometimes actually, I'm not sure if this was one of them or not. No, I don't think it was. I think this was straight up Craigslist buy, but I have found things on eBay that are within driving distance, so I go and meet the people and pick it up. So yeah, anyway. So cheap is the main thing here. So when I was thinking cheap, okay, I'm looking for the best deal I can get on some old cabinets that suit my needs, to reuse, to repurpose a Dayton Classic Series 2 15-inch woofer that is in my opinion, a monster driver that I really love. So that's what I was looking for. This is what I found. And they're all assembled. I'll show you one assembled too. But basically, it is a 34-inch high cabinet, about 17 inches wide, about 11 inches deep, and it's designed to be a 15-inch three-way bass reflex. So I'm going to show you that, and got some cool boxes here I'm going to show you, talk about some of the things I thought about. Okay, so starting from square one here, show you what these things look like. This one I haven't vacuum drained yet, so it's kind of nasty. Just the way I bought it. Carried it downstairs, and here it is. So that's what they look like when they're put together. Man, this thing's absolutely filthy. That cabinet I already vacuumed, and I don't know if you can see the difference or not, but eek, nasty. That's going to be part of what I show you, is cleaning them up. Okay. So anyway, yep, cheap ass resonant speaker with cheapo little drivers in them, cheapo little bass reflex. Oh, I can imagine with a little bit of pressure that probably popped right out. Yeah, these things are freaking incredibly cheesy, right? They probably look great in a catalog, probably look great sitting in a department store on a, I don't know, Woolworths or Sears, where they sold these things at. Probably looked really awesome sitting there. The drivers inside of them were like super cheap, really cheesy drivers. Yeah, super cheesy. No crossovers in them, cheapo wiring, no insulation in them. I mean, cheap, but it's a decent box. I mean, it does not look bad, right? I mean, it's just kind of vanilla, It's, I mean, this will make a nice build, and it's not a whole lot of work because I don't have to do much to it. It's not like I have to worry about building grills and making a finish for it, or even cutting holes. So, one of the benefits of it. Now, disclaimer here, as any expert will tell you, swapping drivers in an existing cabinet, it's not for the faint of heart, because you can wind up with some really terrible results. You've got to find drivers that are properly suited to your cabinet design, okay? To what the original designer had intended. Looking at not just the size of the cabinet and the size of the drivers, but how it's built, what it was originally intended for, etc. So it's really specific. So you don't want to go take a set of speakers like this and say, yeah, I'm going to build me the, $4,000 super frequency flat speaker that's just going to, melt the forums with how flat this frequency response is, right? No, it's not. These are just for fun, right? Just fun speakers to listen to rock and roll, to listen to jazz, to listen to Whitney Houston or whatever you want to listen to, right? They're not designed to be home theater speakers. These are going to be music speakers for me. So anyway, going cheap. Some of the things I thought about, hey, I've already got the woofers, and oh boy, how much were these? Back in the day when I bought them, I'm guessing somewhere maybe 100 and a half. I think I've seen them in closer to the 200 range before they discontinued them. Could be wrong on that. If there's Parts Express, geeks out there that remember these drivers and know how much they were, let me know in the comments below. But I'm guessing they were roughly 150 bucks each. So hey, I've already got 2 of them, so I'm way ahead of the game. And these speakers I bought for 80 bucks, and they're just about mint, very good shape. So I don't think that they've hardly ever even been used. So other than being dirty, they're like brand new. All right, so design considerations. What was I thinking? Okay, I was thinking start with cheap. So therein lies my cabinet choice. But what about when I start hopping these up? How do I make them not so cheap? And I think this cabinet weighs about the same as my woofer. So how do I make them not so cheap? Well, okay, I've already got my driver, my woofer. I know that this woofer here has, I had mentioned in my last video, frequency response usable frequency response in the say mid to low 20s maybe, on up to about 1,000, with its sweet spot hitting right in there in the say 30 to 800 range. And so nice speaker, and my TS parameters for the speaker, for a sealed enclosure on this speaker, it's like 1.5 feet, so not very big. For a bass reflex speaker, I'm sorry, which I want this to be, I thought about making it an acoustic suspension, but then I'd have to chamber it, and why? I would wind up chambering the bottom. I would wind up with a big space up on the top, but I would probably have to then find another woofer, probably a smaller woofer to put in as a mid-range, and then try to utilize this cabinet space somehow, and probably maybe even port that small woofer. I don't know. It's not what I was looking for. I was looking for easy and cheap. So anyway, yeah, so I figure, okay, well, I'll just stick with the bass reflex. And believe it or not, when you calculate this thing out, for the box to hit about 20 hertz, and this is about a 3 1/4 cubic foot box, give or take. This little bass reflex port that they put in it is actually right on the money. It's 1 3/4 by 1 inch, and to hit that, it's correct. So the first time I use these speakers, I'm going to use them in their stock fashion, just cleaned up, and I'll show you a video of that. Second time around is when I'm actually going to start getting into trying to make that sound better. Then I'll get into starting to change out drivers and bracing up the cabinet, and et cetera, et cetera. So at that time, see, this little bass reflex port is going to be horrible for noise. This thing's going to chuff like you wouldn't believe. So it needs a bigger bass reflex port, and I've got some on order. All right, so moving right along then. So what were my design considerations? Okay, so I had a choice. I already had my woofer, right? Now, I had the tweeter that came with it, this little 4-inch cheapo job. Probably got no idea kind of power this thing handle, maybe 15, 20 watts. And then I had these laying around from a center project that I did. Okay. So I had 2 of these from a center channel I made, and it still works. I just took these out of it. But the reason I got these was because they're supposed to be really good for vocals, the vocal region. This is a Dayton 5-inch full range PA driver. Okay. So it's designed to handle a lot of power, and it's supposed to last a long time, and it's supposed to be a full range driver. So you can tell right away, depending on the diameter of a full range driver, what you can kind of anticipate in terms of where it's going to be smooth at, because obviously this is not going to hit 20,000 hertz. It's not going to hit 20 hertz, right? So, but it's going to hit somewhere in between there. And so finding a speaker that sounds decent in that range it's part of the design. It's an important part of this design for the end result. So, oh, and another thing is sound pressure level. So that woofer is about 91.5 dB per 1 watt at whatever, 2.83 volts. And this one here is about 88 point something, close to 90. So I think these two will marry well. Word of caution when picking out drivers for old cabinets. One of the things that is very hard to do is when you have an old set of cabinets, you got no idea what these drivers actually were. You don't have TS parameters for them. There's no way for you to properly calculate the box size. You can assume that the designer did that already, but a lot of times, especially back in the day, the cabinet box size had a great influence, a greater influence on how many they can fit into a shipping container than what was best for sound. So anyway, there's no way for me to tell what these drivers are like. I can try playing with them by putting a crossover in them. It's an insulation, some bracing. That's what I'm going to try to do at first, just to see if I can improve them. But the main thing is that this mid-range driver, which will go in a sealed cabinet that I'm building across here, is going to really hit that sweet spot. In my center channel that I ran these with, it's actually, they're operating as a woofer, as a mid-bass woofer, coupled with a yeah, compression horn. And because of the size of the box and the size of the holes that I had in it, basically this is what I was using. So I was using, 2 of these guys with a 1-inch phenolic dome compression driver for a PA speaker, coupled with a pretty small horn, but it's conical, so it's going to have probably your best frequency response. And it is rather small with a 80 degree by 80 degree dispersion. For the center channel, though, it worked really well. A little on a bright side, though, because this is crazy high SPL. This is like 107 or something dB per 1 watt. So I've actually got a L pad for it. But yeah, but what I heard coming out of these, it sounded good enough for me to decide to use in another design. All right, now moving right along. So with that tweeter, I had to, I was thinking, hey, I could put that tweeter right there. I could have this, mid-range right there. And you know what? That would sound pretty damn good. It would. However, I would need to put the L pad on here, because there's no way to tame that tweeter without an L pad. And so I had already decided, well, okay, I could go acoustic suspension, chambered acoustic suspension with an L pad, cover up that bass reflex hole altogether, right? Or I could take the Jensen label off and put it over there, but I kind of like that that's on there. And I'm just noticing it's still got the little plastic on it. You peel it off and it's nice and shiny and clean. So yeah, but anyway, so that was the thought. But then I was like, you know what? I really want to look at some better tweeters because these are going to be for. I'm going to put these in my office, which is a regular sized bedroom, and I just want them to sound nice. I don't want them to be fatiguing, which a horn style compression driver is gonna cause some fatigue. Will it give you the wow factor? Oh yeah, it'll give you the wow factor, all right. But it will also give you a splitting headache. So I decided not to do that. But instead, what I decided was, nope, I'm not going to keep the original Jensen tweeter. No, this guy is the cheapest of the cheap of the cheap. This thing probably cost about $1, I would think. Yeah, no, I'm not going to use that. I got to researching, right? Some of my favorite places to research drivers at. Parts Express, obviously, and Matasound. But I gravitate toward Parts Express. I've done a lot of business with them, and in the past, I've used, their drivers in my projects. So, yeah, Parts Express it was. So I'm looking at Parts Express. Okay, so first thing for simplicity, right? You're gonna start thinking, hey man, I've got these speakers and now I'm gonna design the perfect crossover, right? Or I'm gonna find and buy the perfect crossover, or maybe I'll hire somebody to make a crossover for it, or whatever the case is. But you gotta understand that you're putting into a kind of an unknown cabinet design that you're gonna be messing with, right? And you got drivers that are just kind of well, we're trying to make the cabinets work with the drivers work with the cabinet. Sorry. So yeah, it kind of limits that, and cost. I don't want to spend a fortune on these. Like $200, including the cabinets, is what I'm looking at as a goal. So that's between the parts that I had laying around and what I'm going to put into them. I don't really want to go more than a couple $100 on these. And by the time I'm done, I hope to have a pretty good sounding pair of speakers. Now, that's a little bit of a cheat there because I have had these woofers for a long time. So, in actuality, these would probably turn into more like a $500 or $600 project if you did have to buy the woofers. But hey, there's woofers for less, there's woofers for more. Again, just depending on what kind of cabinet you come up with, what you find that you want to rebuild is going to be that woofer is going to be like the main component with that box, right? That's the thing you've got to get right. Yeah, so that being said, this one fit my bill. So, all right, moving right along. So, researching the mid range, I got that nailed down, and I figured, hey, I'm just gonna go ahead and this box is big enough to port with that woofer, so I'm gonna put a port in here. Got that in order. I'm gonna make a sealed chamber that's also gonna stiffen up the baffle and the sides. Okay, so that part is covered, and we're talking about a 91, 92 dB woofer with an 88, 89 dB PA mid-range. Now, why is that okay? You're probably wondering that. Like, why not 90 and 90 or 100 and 100 if you could find a woofer that's 100 dB? But, more likely in the 85 to 89 range, right? Why not make them perfectly even? Okay, well, I'll tell you why. The reason I'm doing what I'm doing is because I want this guy to be a little bit louder. I want it to be a little bit more pronounced on the bottom end, a little richer, a little punchier, especially in that, drum bass region. Really, I love that in music. So oboes and trumpets and all that kind of stuff, a lot of it's going to come through the woofer. So I really want that to be have a little bit more emphasis. And like I mentioned in previously, the mid-ranges for some reason they're always going to tend to sound a little noticeable, right? It takes a lot to make a mid-range blend. So that's part of this process too, is with a crossover, decent crossover, I figure with this dB, and the impedance curve on these speakers, if you look them up, they're pretty good. They're not real spiky in the ranges that I'm going to be using them at. They're fairly level at their nominal impedance throughout the range that I'm going to be using them, which is going to make my life with crossovers a whole bunch easier, and it will be a simpler design and it will sound better. So in other words, could I spend $500 on a woofer and $200 on a mid-range? Yeah, but if it ain't right, if those specs ain't right, it's gonna sound like crap, and then it's gonna take a whole bunch of screwing around to get the crossover right for it. So anyway, I'm just going simple. All right, so, and I'll actually, by the time this is all said and done, I'll probably put everything I used in this build in the in the description of the video, and that way, if you want to build it, you can. If you find an old pair of cabinets like this, just like this, and you want to build them, you can find drivers kind of similar to what I'm using, and you'll have some better idea of how to do it even easier instead of figuring out as you go like I am. All right, so the tweeter. Tweeter. So the horn's going to be too loud. The original tweeter, I don't know I have no idea how good or bad this is. I'm going to listen to them at some point and find out. But that's only audibly what I can hear, and I have no idea what the SPL is on these. So I'm going to kind of put those by the side for now. So what I actually got, and I'm really excited about this. I love, they make you happy, right? Parts Express, baby. It's exciting when one of those comes in the mail or sitting on your studio. All right, so the goodies that I finally picked, and that's part of the fun thing of building speakers, is all the thinking that goes into it, and all the research, and what works and what doesn't work, and what do they have that kind of meets your needs, right? All right, so, well, let's start with the easy stuff. First of all, on the back of these speakers is just the old-fashioned spring-loaded terminals, and one of them has actually got a hunk of wire in it stuffed in there, and it might be cracked or something, I'm not sure. But anyway, this, I'm just going to make it super simple and use the standard 5-way binding post that I can pop my banana plug cables into, and they're not super cheesy. I mean, if Danny's out there listening, right? Yeah, they're probably steel or something. I'm sure they're probably steel, gold plated, but for what this is, it should be fine. And the best thing is it fits the hole identical, because the one that's on there right now is the same size, but it's the spring-loaded side, the spring-loaded kind. So yeah, that's it. But as far as tweeters go, what I finally settled on, I'm a little alarmed here because I only see one of these boxes in here, and there's supposed to be 2 tweeters, and they shortchanged me a tweeter. Yeah, oh boy, bummer. That's gonna put a little slow down on this project. All right, so what did I pick out for a tweeter? Well, I picked out a Marantz replacement speaker. Now this is the tweeter that, if you were around in the 70s and 80s, this was in almost most of your designs. A few different companies made them, some better than others. This is a reproduction that is designed to fill that void for old-time speaker, vintage speaker rebuilders that are doing a Marantz or whatever. But I like it for this design for a few different reasons. So it's got enough power for a home system, 30 watts. If I was gonna go with if I was really shooting for some SPLs, I'd probably look for a tweeter that's at least in the 100-watt range. But this one should suffice for the volumes I'll be playing it at. And it's very similar to the original design, with the exception of it's got a bigger motor structure, and I think it's got maybe a 3/4 inch coil in it, maybe copper, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's got a decent frequency response. That's what I liked about it. A frequency response and an SPL level. The SPL level on this, I believe, is 90. It's advertised as 90. And so that should match up really well with the other two drivers I have. And it also, the frequency range on this one, actually, the flattest part of it, carries over to the flattest part of my mid-range. So when I'm looking at the frequency graphs that they give you, right, you could download the PDF. You can look at those frequency graphs and measuring just the raw speaker. And so my philosophy when I'm designing speakers is I want to cross this over. I want to marry drivers. I want to match drivers up that have similar SPLs. So I don't want one to be way louder than another. And I want them to cross over at their sweet spots, at the tail end of their sweet spots. So just before then. Because you got to remember, when you throw a passive crossover in, it's got a slope, right? So it's gonna slope off. Each one of these guys is gonna slope, and you want that kind of slope. You don't want a hole there. You want them to mesh. So what I do personally, and this is just something that I do when I'm designing speakers or putting them together, fixing them, and that is I like to catch it as this tail end rises. Reason being is because now I'm going to slope it down, right? So I want to try to catch each driver at kind of its highest point at the tail end of its sweet spot on the high end, right? From the mid-range high end to the tweeter low end, and vice versa from the mid-range lower to the woofer higher. I'm going to try to utilize each driver across its most flat frequency response. Okay, so frequency response on the tweeter is a little bit funny on this guy because it's only 15,000 hertz. Okay, so you might look at that and say, well, I want one that does 20 at least. And you can get that. Dome tweeters will reach 17, 18,000, 19,000 hertz pretty flat. Some make it all the way up to 20, some beyond. Your horns, same way. But my hearing, I can't hear above 15,000 hertz. I've tried it. I've ran test tones, and I cannot hear a damn thing above 15,000. So, most people, I guess younger people, when their hearing is real good, can hear 20, but that's like dog whistle. I mean, that's like you don't even hear it, right? So you would be surprised. 15,000 hertz is so high that it just disappears to where you can't even hear it anymore because your ear doesn't operate like that, right? And you might think, oh man, yeah, but at 20,000 hertz, you're going to hear all the cymbals and the airiness and the this and the that. No. It's much lower because you can't hear it. I mean, especially if you're older like me, you're not going to hear much above that. So, not too worried about the frequency range on it. It was more important that the SPL was right and that the frequency response was flat. And the other thing I did like about it, just from a style perspective, was the fact that this is very retro. I mean, that's about as retro as it gets. And it's a significant upgrade from the original. So I kind of dig that, It's kind of like, say, for example, if you were, back in the day, you were trying to make these things sound better, you might pick up a, phenolic ring tweeter like that, commonly available, pretty cheap. Yeah, cheap. I don't know, 15 bucks, 20 bucks. Cheap. Anyway, that'll work for that. I do have to contact Parts Express though, because I only got the one. And the next thing I'm going to show you is the crossover Which, oh man, crossovers. To build it, to make it, to not make it, to buy a store-bought one or what. I'm sure all you DIY guys out there, you probably saw me grab this crossover box and you're probably like, oh man, this dude, I'm turning off now. He has no idea what he's talking about. Hey, maybe I don't. I'm not that much of a geek, but I do know for a certain budget range, right? You want to get the most bang for your buck. So, can I use software and design my own crossover and then tailor it? Yeah. Uh, newbie, not newbie, but average at it, right? I don't know if I'm any good at it. But can I do it? Yeah. But do I want to spend, $30 on a single capacitor for the mid range? No. Do I want to spend, you know, $200 just in parts just to see if my design works? No. Again, the drivers I chose, they have very flat nominal impedances. They have very similar SPLs. So I'm not that afraid of going with a stock crossover because these are designed like this is 8 ohm, right? So it's an 8 ohm crossover. And you know what? It should be fine. It's rated at something like, forget exactly what these were. I'll put them in the description down below, but I want to say these are like a 800 to 800 crossover on the low side, maybe 4,000 or 4,500 on the high side. So again, the reason I chose this crossover was because it had the right crossover points, maybe a little bit on the extreme side, but close enough to where it'll accomplish what I wanted to accomplish with my crossover points on these drivers. And then the other big thing is that it does have poly caps, which is a really big, I believe this is a huge benefit because the poly caps are going to sound much better than those little electrolytics. They're going to provide you with probably greater power handling. And, anyway, I was really thankful that this has that. Now it's got some iron core inductors, okay? I'm not thrilled about that. And if I was spending more money on this project, I would definitely, even if I was going to buy this, use the board and the poly caps, I would find equivalent air coils and use some heavier gauge air coils on here. But again, big money. An air coil for a woofer to cut off at 800 to 500 hertz, man, I mean, that's, that's probably $50 by itself. So yeah, didn't need that. Anyway, so that is the crossover that's going to go in there. And I'm going to tinker around with this and probably run it with the stock Jensen drivers as well to see what that sounds like. All right, so last thing I'm going to show you before I wrap this video up and contact Parts Express for jipping me on a tweeter is insulation. All right, so I got one thing to show you. I'll be right back. All right. Now, I already told you I'm not making money on these videos, at least not yet for sure. And I'm not a sponsor. I'm not getting paid by Home Chef. But I like Home Chef. Me and my wife, it's just us here. And I'm telling you what, this little box here, $90. It's got like 4 to 5 meals in it a week. And it's healthy. You can lose some weight. I'm not in the best shape of my life, but I did lose about 15 pounds eating Home Chef. So that's cool. And every week they get delivered. And what's inside the box? Looks like a poly insulation. Yeah. Insulates, cushions, protects, no adhesives, no PVC or other materials to contaminate the polyester recycling stream. The fill is recycled PET staple fiber and the film is 100% PET made in the USA. You know what? Why spend money on a bag of polyfill when I got tons of this stuff, because we get these every week. So yeah, I've got an entire bag of it here ready to go, and they're in nice sheets that are going to fit real nice inside the cabinet. Okay, I'm not going to leave the plastic on it. I'm going to peel the plastic off and then probably glue or staple it to the inside of the cabinet. I've got enough of this stuff where I may do some of this in there too, just to kind of break up the sound waves a little bit more and kind of add a little bit more resonance. Might go down a little bit. This stuff doesn't really kill resonance too well. So anyway, that's what's going on. So to recap, I'm going to go with some bracing on the inside, like I had mentioned in my other video. I'm going to go with the insulation. I'm going to go with these drivers I selected, the crossovers I selected. And by the time everything's said and done, I hope to have a decent sounding pair of cheap speakers that are big enough to play nice and loud, maintain control, and deliver full range. So that's the goal. That's it for this video. Thank you again for watching, and catch the next one.